All right, we're going live. Welcome everybody to the Bootleg Weekly. Me and Roy here again to talk about Tesla, the stock we love talking about if it's not SoFi. Roy, how's it going?
It's good. Yeah, it's been crazy just how much Tesla's been in the news. It felt like there was maybe a 6 month or 8 month period where there wasn't a lot other than Cybertruck, which Cybertruck's great. And now it's like not even just every week, like every day there's something like just really good or really bad. Like there's stuff happening, so it's not boring. We've got a lot to talk about with that. Maybe a little bit of Google, but it's been a good week so far. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. I was just for people's awareness, I was telling Roy behind the scenes before we got started backstage. I like the fact that we're back at a place where Elon's focus is on Tesla and we can actually talk about Tesla news more consistently because it felt as though for the past year or so that, or ever since the Twitter acquisition, which coincidentally also marked the top, that his focus had been completely scattered on other things, social issues, and it still is on so many like political issues. But every one out of every 6 or 7 tweets is something Tesla related, and I think that's all I was looking for because now we're also seeing it in the news as well, with Tesla having more consistent updates about what they're doing and getting people excited again.
Yeah, it's night and day different. And Elon's always going to have a level of distraction just because he's in so many pies. But it seemed like, at least for a while, that Tesla was a bit on autopilot, not even full self driving. It's autopilot, just kind of going and not real exciting. It's doing okay. And it seems like there's a combination of a couple of factors. Probably, Linda Yaccarino seems like she's doing, a good job as far as X, maybe taking that a little bit off. SpaceX is going well. And then Elon really, really, really freaking hates when people doubt him. Like you short sellers certainly, but others as well. And there's a lot of that coming at all angles against Elon Musk, specifically on Tesla. And so that seems like it's brought him kind of back into the focus. And if somebody that's bearish on this company is skeptical, they might say, well, this is just so that Elon gets that massive compensation approved. I don't think so. I think that this is more ego than anything. Like the money, it's nice, but whatever. But yeah, it's for sure ego. He likes to prove people wrong, and hopefully he'll do that yet again. Bootleg, bootleg.
Yeah, I just want to interact with some of these people. Tevis, are you guys bullish on Tesla? It's my largest position. My Tesla position is significantly larger than SoFi for me. And that's because, I was buying Tesla back in late 2019, early 2020 is when I started, and I've been DCAing all the way through, on the way up, on the way down. I DCA'd as recently as a couple of weeks ago. I know, Roy, you've been buying more recently as well and building it as a position. Safe to say we're both bullish Tesla.
Yeah, I've been in since November 2022, so not an early adopter at all, and didn't add much to it. I just had a small starter position. When we fell under 200, and actually as we entered the new year, that was my number one priority, was to DCA into Tesla and not do it all at once because, I mean, we see what the stock does. It's very, very volatile, and I'm fine missing the bottom completely because I've did that before. In 2022, I ended up missing the bottom by a dollar and change, which was horrible because I started buying at like 144, 148, whatever. Like those shares are up, that's great, but like it's just stupid. It's one of those mistakes where I'm like, I know better. Like, why did I do that? And there's a gulf between like what you know and what you actually do. So this time I'm like, okay, made my mistake. I'm not doing it again. I'm very bullish long term. Short term, there could be some pain, and I'm kind of curious on that. Like the biggest piece of news, there's a lot for Tesla. My goodness,
There's a
like where
lot.
do you even want to start?
I made a list of stuff. Let me just pull it up here. But there's a lot of stuff for Tesla.
It's
Um,
crazy, man. Like it feels like 3 months of Tesla jammed into like 6 days. Honestly,
so for the people watching, it's not like we want to always talk about Tesla when we're not talking about SoFi. It's just because there's such a high volume of news that's just how it's turned out over the past several weeks. We could also talk about this, although Rat Pack, I think, is just trying to rile me up because this is the quickest way to get me fucking fired up.
Oh man, you're gonna see scorched earth Tevis if you keep this up, guys. Like,
Dude,
I just why Canada? Like, what are you doing? Although I know that the threshold for that is quite high, so probably you're not making those gains quite yet. But when you're an older and grayer Tevis, then
well, not necessarily. Like they have this. Do we want to talk about this?
I I would say yes. Spend a couple of minutes on it because I don't fully understand it, and I'm kind of curious, and it
Okay,
seems odd.
so let me throw this up on the tweet that I had on it because I think that's going to help set the stage a little bit on this. Some of you might have already seen this news, others maybe not so much. So basically, news came out this week that the government of Canada, who released their 2024 budget, um, introduced a new. Well, they raised their taxes. I can't find the post. They raised their taxes on capital gains. So previously, and people get this wrong, it's not a 66% tax. Um, it's you will get taxed on 66% of the amount. So 66% is taxable at your tax bracket. The rule of thumb that I always operate under, because it's currently 50%, it's, if I make 100K in profit, then 50,000 is eligible for tax at a 50%, what my income tax rate is. And so 25% ends up being what I pay the government. So now it's going to move from 25% to essentially like 33% because it's going to be 66% is going to be taxed. And then half of that is what you're going to end up paying because you're going to be in the highest tax bracket. Now, they say it doesn't affect the majority of people. It only affects those making $1 million plus. Here in Canada, you have a tax exemption for primary residence if you're flipping your primary. But if you have a second house, like a lot of people have cottages up here, or a second property or anything like that, or even if you're operating under a business, that is still going to affect a lot of people. Number one. Number two, for people who are working in startups, such as myself, and you're going to exercise options because you raised another, round, or you're going to raise funding and that raises the valuation of your company, the government's going to keep most of that. And so
I,
the people who
that's
are the most outspoken critics of this was the two, what's his name, Harley Finkelstein and Toby, basically the two heads of Shopify, because Shopify is like the story, company for Canada or Canadian innovation entrepreneurship. And they were basically saying that this is horrible because what we've been seeing over the past several years or so is that innovation in Canada has been falling. And innovation in Canada has been falling particularly because it's not a favorable environment for entrepreneurs to start those companies, right? So you have to think about the downstream implications because I think it's sort of intellectually dishonest for the government to say, oh, it only affects 0.1% of the population. Well, that 0.1% of the population is like the biggest job creator in the tech sector or the private sector in general. Like imagine, Shopify's created thousands of jobs, created millions in terms of shareholders equity and employees equity. What if the founders of Shopify just didn't want to do it in Canada and wanted to do it in the US? And so the idea is that Canada's loss is the US's gain because every future entrepreneur here is going to say, you know what, it's not even worth it for me to start a company and employ people in Canada. I'm just going to go down south and I'm going to start doing it there. The dollar is stronger. I can pick and choose the environment that I want to do it in because I have 50 states to choose from. And so the federal government here, who has been the biggest net adder of jobs, like if you look at a chart, you'll see the private sector just falling off a cliff in terms of jobs, and you'll see government jobs slowly, climbing higher and higher. It's like, well, what do you expect? It's a very like socialist favoring country, and the government is obviously going to be expanding their budgets. They're going to be hiring more people, and so on and so forth. But it's totally going to cripple private sector, especially for entrepreneurs who want to start innovative companies here. Like, I have stock in the company that I'm helping lead, and I'm leading them from a product perspective. And if we want to make an exit several years down the line, why should the government keep 2/3 of that? Like, I'm working, nights, I'm working weekends, I'm working to build that business up and make those decisions. And so it just becomes one of those things where it's going to further accelerate the brain drain in a country like Canada, where the people who are the job creators, you're disincentivizing those people to foster further innovation in this country. That's just my take, of course. I think it's very important to think of the context around this move and the downstream implications of this move, more so than to say, oh, well, not everybody's going to have over 250,000 in capital gains, so it's not going to affect everybody. It is going to affect, jobs in the future. And the last thing I'll say on that, Roy, is that this goes into effect on June 25th, something like that, for the budget of the new year. I would argue that there's going to be a bunch of people or corporations that are selling off assets from now until then, or at least trying to sell them off. Probably new houses that are entered the market, people trying to liquidate, or at least selling off their stocks that have significant gains on it. Because if I had 500,000 in gains from Apple and I could sell some off from now until June 25th and lock a smaller tax rate, why wouldn't I do that, knowing that my tax is going to increase significantly after that point? So, I don't know. That's just sort of my gut reaction to these things. And obviously, being a little bit more dialed into the tech sector here in Toronto, that's the feed that I get aggregated from the algorithm. Is I look at the folks from Shopify, I look at the folks from Wealthsimple, I look at all of these Canadian companies that are leading the way up here. And I mean, look, we're in a country that is highly oligopolized. For telecom, for example, 87% of all telecom is three companies. And it's the same for banking, it's the same for media, it's the same for so many different industries. And that's been steadily increasing because the government disincentivizes new entrants with exactly the same policies that we just saw here.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it with the impact of well, Shopify certainly, but also startups. It just that changes things substantially. And already that graph that you're referring to with the Canadian jobs, you and I sent that back and forth earlier in the week. It's not looking good. You don't have an entrepreneur culture up there, and this decapitates basically what you have. So it seems very short-sighted. Hopefully, it doesn't impact you too much. Didn't even think about the short-term selling, but I mean, like if Shopify ends up leaving over this, I doubt that would happen. They may just change how they do SBC or something. But I don't know where they'd move. I guess maybe the United States. But yeah, it just trying to think of like valuable companies to invest in outside of energy in Canada. Just there's not a lot of them outside of Shopify, so it's shocking. Yeah.
Well, yeah, even think of it from both perspectives, right? You think of the founder who wants to start a new company and asking yourself, okay, why would I do it in Canada versus in the US? And then you
Yeah.
think of the employee who is the day one at the startup. Sorry, I'm just trying to find. Yeah, this is what I wanted to find. I'll show it to you. This is what we shared. And then you think of, the day one at the startup saying, okay, I'm going to make it big on my equity once we sell out, and I can choose where to start, whether in Canada or in the US. Like, why would you do it in Canada? So this is the chart that I was, talking about. The public sector has just seen this massive percentage increase since 2014. Private sector obviously saw a huge hit in 2020, and it's not growing at the same pace. Self-employed, is contracting even. And so this is only going to get exacerbated by policies like this one that hinder that innovation in the private sector. So anyways, I wasn't planning on talking about that because I don't like to get political on this channel, um, but it is something that is gonna. I mean, it's not gonna like. I'm not sitting on $250,000 of gains to say, oh wow, like it's gonna affect me personally, but it is gonna affect me to some point down the line because I work in that tech industry and I'm very incentivized to have equity based compensation in my career. And not only that, to further, deepen my ties and my networks in the Toronto tech space. And so if that Toronto tech space starts to shrink, then obviously that affects me.
Yeah, and companies can get mad and leave like that. We've seen that, and we're seeing that now with Tesla. That there's they announced it officially today, the shareholder meeting that's coming up. Several proposals. We talked about Elon's compensation is certainly part of it, but a big one also is whether or not Tesla officially moves their headquarters into Texas. I'm a Texan now, fully support it. There will be a cost, and there are some downsides to it, but just a lot of it is this Delaware judge ruled in a way that is, I don't know if it's unprecedented, but it seems to be certainly at odds with Tesla shareholder interest and also Tesla shareholder will. So I understand why they're making the move that they do, and companies can do that even if it doesn't help their bottom line. They can just say, you know what, this is an unfavorable culture. I'm out of here. And so Tesla's moving to Texas. Tevis, hopefully you're moving to Texas too.
Hey man, if I had a job or a partner that are American, I'm right there. It's so incredibly difficult, and I know most of the people watching are in the U.S. I think my audience is, I think, like 4/5 in the U.S. It is so incredibly difficult to legally obtain paperwork for the U.S., like a work visa, and then have an application for your green card and actually do that. And it's just insane, man. Like I commented on this post last week about this riot or whatever, and people were, chanting all kinds of crazy shit and burning down the flag. And I was like, do you understand how fucking surreal this looks from somebody who is looking at it from the outside in? Because I realize that the dollar is not only stronger, the economy is stronger, and the policies, you have so much more flexibility in terms of the freedom of mobility and the freedom of choice, because you have 50 states and they're all fairly developed. Most of them are fairly developed in terms of the alternatives that they provide to you, and that people can come from all over the world and then still be dissatisfied. It's like that just shows a level to me of tone deafness around how the situation is around the world. And it's just kind of ironic where, I'm somebody who has worked very hard in my career and I continue to do so. And I mean, YouTube is just like a side thing for fun for me. I enjoy doing it. But to do all of the things right and you still can't break through is like, it's a little gut wrenching and, you know, demotivating. So, moving to the States is something that's obviously on my mind. It's something that's been growing in the back of my mind. And then you see like people like this who are like, fuck America, basically. And I'm like, dude, what are you even doing there? Like, whatever country you think is better, just go there. And
Yeah,
just, it's tone deaf, right?
I think bottom line is, I mean, our we won't get too much further into politics, but our immigration policy needs to be reformed, certainly. And I think one of the biggest pieces with that is we should allow for more people whose first name starts with a T and are living in Canada. Um,
Seriously.
like unlimited number of those guys or gals, I'm okay with that, can move to the United States per year, and be citizens, residents. So uh, yeah, we'd love to have you. It's not perfect anywhere in the world. Certainly, the world has problems. Bull market keeps chugging on, but yeah, the dollar, man. We won't like talk too much about this, but this is just crazy. Let me share this over here. I'll have to blow it up to. The dollar index is just ridiculous, and we kind of ended the year at the low, at an even. So this dollar index against all currencies, some are doing better than others. There's another chart that actually shows how the dollar has performed against I think 31 different currencies in the year. It's basically flat with the Mexican peso and everything else. It's just destroying some, like the Turkish lira that are hyperinflating. That of course it makes sense, but even like the Japanese yen, I'd have to look it up, but it's ridiculous right now, and of course it makes it very difficult as we go into the earnings season. If you have a company that has a lot of international exposure, if we look at it over the last, well, really just a year to date, it continues to accelerate. And so maybe not all of that will be felt this quarter, but a lot of the companies that I own have a lot of international exposure. And that comes with lower margins, lower revenue than it is expected just because of the strength of the dollar if they're getting a lot of revenue from internet overseas. Now, it works in your favor if you're importing a lot just because it tends to be a little bit cheaper, although that's not always realized up at front. And so this for me as an investor is very annoying. It's great though if you're an American traveling somewhere else because you're like, hey, I feel like a king over here. But there's two sides of that coin. So
Wait, why is it annoying to you?
as an investor, so as the stronger the dollar performs against other currencies, when you have a
Oh,
global company that you're invested in, they take a real hit on earnings. PayPal, for instance, started when they released their earnings. I don't know that they've always done this, but at least since 2022, when the dollar really started roaring, they ended up publishing their data as far as this is what our revenue is, and this is what dollar or FXN, dollar neutral revenue would actually look like. And dramatic impact. Palantir is another one, not as large as far as international, but it hits them like any a company that's getting a meaningful percentage of international revenue, they're getting hit. It's just bottom line. If you're importing again, it can help you out, but it's not quite the same. So it tends to also be that with a lot of these global stocks that are in growth mode, whenever the dollar is really ramping up, they do not fare well that day. So, of course, I have a long term vision. It's fine. It is what it is. But like, man, I would love it. Like, if while I'm traveling internationally, really strong dollar, that's fantastic. And then when I'm like here, kind of stuck in one spot, just like, hey, that can go down a bit, maybe just even neutral, like I'm happy with. But no, it does make some things tough. Have you ever heard of the dollar milkshake theory?
yeah. Yeah,
That
so
may be
basically, like, the dollars of other countries will devalue faster than the dollar of the US. So the US can basically run everybody else out of the game. Like, if the US is inflating at X, everybody else is 2X, 3X, whatever. And so relative to the dollar, they're going to lose purchasing power.
Yeah, and like there's a whole like if you go through that whole theory, it's been a little while for me. It's not just short term, like long term, it destroys every other currency on the planet, which is actually not good for America. It's not good for anybody. Nobody wants this, so we'll have to see. There's the thing you don't want to do, as an American government right now is print a lot of money. That's one of the things you could do to fix this, but that causes a lot of other problems. So, yeah, that'd be great. You can maybe Noto has a nice daughter or something that you can, get married to.
Noto has a lot of. I saw this post on Reddit around, and I know we don't want to talk about SoFi; it's taboo. Um, it's a little verboten on
They're
this.
both in.
Yeah, um, but I saw that their rate of the jobs at SoFi was increasing. That they had like 100 listings up, as opposed to the normal, which is around 50 to 60. Some people were speculating to say that they're just making up for the layoffs that they had back in January, February. They're just hiring those roles back, just getting some new blood going. But that's the fastest way that Noto can probably help me. I will sing for my supper. I just need documentation, maybe. But in terms of the dollar milkshake theory, I think I saw this post. I think it was by Globe and Mail this week, where they were saying like the Canadian dollar specifically is going to lose purchasing power over the US based on what they're going to do with regards to rates over time. And that's really scary, right? Because over the long tail, you're just sort of you have a limited runway. If we're at point 0.7 right now, like every US dollar, or sorry, every Canadian dollar is 70 cents in the US, then we're going to be at point 0.5 soon. It's going to be a 2 to 1. And that is terrifying as a concept because you're always like you're trying to move upwards, but you're always running against a treadmill, you know? And so like you might be running at full speed and you're just staying in the same spot.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. I hadn't paid attention to the Canadian dollar specifically, but man, year to date, it has taken a beating. Don't know how it's doing against other currencies, but probably doesn't matter as much. I mean, we're major trade partners. But I when I was the Canadian dollar has actually been strong until relatively recent. I don't know if it's all Trudeau's fault or what. There's a lot of things that are happening. But I remember growing up, I was in Alaska. We had a lot of Canadian money into our system. Did I ever tell you about the Canadian quarters?
No, tell me.
So growing up in Alaska, mowing yards, that's where it's at for the summertime because you have like 18 to 20 hours of daylight and just amazing
How warm
soil.
does it get there in the summer?
In the summer, it depends. Where we were at, it'd be like in the daytime, which is most of the day, it's like 60 to 70. And we were near the ocean, so it's a little bit more moderate. In the interior, up to 100.
Oh, God.
But I would mow lawns, as a kid. I think I started when I was 12. And sadly, I bought mostly baseball cards. I like, stupid, but whatever. Anyway, there was this lady that we mowed lawns for, and she gave us the lowest rate, but she was a family friend. And so we mowed her lawn. And she began to pay us in Canadian quarters. So it was like a ridiculously low rate. This was in the 90s. I'm again old. And I think that she was paying us like $7 per hour, like total for my brother and I mowing her lawn. And it was just such a tiny rate. We were like, whatever, we'll just do her lawn. But then she had the gall when she went to Canada, she loaded up on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars of quarters and then would pay them out to us and just be like, oh no, they spend just the same as American quarters. They didn't. It was like 70 cents to the dollar at that point. And they were a pain to use. I mean, like even if she is paying in American quarters, like you go to the store and you have a bunch of quarters, is like, what is that? But to make things even worse, like they're Canadian. Like nobody, if you have one or two that slip in there, like whatever. Vending machines didn't take them. A lot of stores didn't take them. And I'm like, dude, I don't plan to go to Canada any freaking time soon. So to retaliate against aggressive monetary policy instituted by this lady, I was almost said her name, but I'm not going to say it because there's not that many people in Alaska. When I was in college, I was a resident advisor, and they asked us to do like a charity type thing at some point. And so I did there was a fund, I don't remember the name of it, that fed like hungry kids in Canada. And so I said, hey, what we're going to do, because there's so much freaking Canadian money that's just monopoly money in our system. Anytime you get any Canadian money at all, no American money, just Canadian, stick it in this bucket. We're going to freaking send it back to them. And I hope that they don't choke on it because they're kids that are eating, this food that they're hungry or whatever. But like I had it. Like anytime I see, and I'm glad I'm in Texas, by the way, because I don't see much Canadian money, but I am actually triggered when I get some of that junk in our system. So Tevis, you're welcome in Texas, but you keep your freaking monopoly money at home.
Dude, it's fine. It's not even green. It's like all kinds of colors. There's like animals on it. There's not like there's presidents on yours. There's animals on ours. There's like a freaking beaver and a duck and all the
The
kinds of
beaver on the dime. Yep. The queen, some sort of queen of England for some reason. I don't know.
Dude, for whatever reason, amongst all of this inflation, this is like totally us shooting the shit at this point, but for
Yeah.
whatever reason, amongst all of this inflation, the queen dies, and the first thing that they want to do is we got to change all of our money in circulation because we got to get this new guy who was also like 95 years old, and it cost so much money just to do that, just print everything, get all the old ones out of circulation. I'm like, are you guys going to do this, every time? Like this is ridiculous. Um, Anyways, I'm just ranting at this point. So thank you, Roy, for starting off this podcast with
It's bootleg.
Canada
Okay.
news.
Let's pivot back to Tesla. And I guess maybe the best way to like kind of resume that is
Yeah.
with all that's happened over this week, are you more bullish, bearish, or just confused with Tesla over the last week?
Yeah, I am more bullish with Tesla simply for the reason that I commented this. Elon, it seems, is back on hardcore mode. And what I mean by that is, chip on the shoulder, sleep on the factory floor type Elon, betting the farm on robotaxi. And he said, I'm not betting the farm. Hold on, I'll pull up the tweet. So, okay, so there's a couple of things I think we should talk about for Tesla. The shareholder vote that's coming up, Elon, like being a wartime CEO in this moment versus what we saw over the past couple of years, the Tesla layoffs, Tesla India. I think that's a really interesting topic as well. And then FSD and robotaxi. Let's just start with a couple of posts here. So let me do this. And then let me do this. So this gentleman here, Chris, made this post. And this post basically said, this was on April 15th, 2 days ago. I told you that Elon has re-entered wartime CEO mode. The scene is familiar to the veterans of the Tesla community. Today, Elon decided to bet the entire company on robotaxi. I don't know if all in robotaxi is right or wrong. I don't have the answer. Elon actually liked this tweet from this gentleman. And a day later, he responded to this thread. Let me pull it up. By Holmars, and the thread basically said, Elon is betting the company on autonomy as he's lost his mind. What do you expect from a guy who bet his car company on electrification in 2003? Elon said, not quite betting the company, but going balls to the wall for autonomy. It is a blindingly obvious move. Everything else is like variations on a horse carriage. To which I responded, Elon back in hardcore mode, which is very bullish for Tesla because I've been around I was following Tesla somewhat tangentially when, in 2017, they almost ran out of money. I was following them with the whole like Elon commenting on this, Thai diver scandal and, 420 funding secured and all throughout this, even before I invested. Elon was an entertaining figure to me, and that's pretty much all it was. I hadn't read up on Tesla. I wasn't, looking into the company or what he was trying to do, but he was just like an out there personality. And I really only invested after they hit that critical scale, that profitability, and that served me very well. And so I've been invested now for about 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years in Tesla. And there are these cycles, right? And after you read the biography by Ashley Vance, after you read the biography by Walter Isaacson, I've read, both. There are these definite reasons why this man has been able to produce so much shareholder returns over the past throughout all of these companies. And the fact that he can do them all simultaneously is insane. The biggest risk for that is key man risk. And that's especially relevant for Tesla because if he's juggling a lot of plates, he has SpaceX, Neuralink, Boring, Tesla, whatever, Twitter. If he's juggling so many plates, his attention can be diverted in so many different things. It's like, oh, here's the shiny new thing. Twitter was the shiny new thing, right? And that's what his entire attention was diverted to, which made it really scary because he's still giving, even him with a diverted focus is more effective than most CEOs with 100% focus. And that's like as objective as I can say that, regardless of being biased. You just see it from the output of him being able to simultaneously build $100 billion rocket company and, a $1 trillion car company. And so with Twitter, that took away a lot of attention. Tesla fell from the all-time highs to where it is now. It fell significantly. And that all coincides with that Twitter acquisition because Twitter was struggling financially. It was it was a question mark whether it was going to make it or not from a bankruptcy perspective. And all Tesla investors were left here saying, you sold Tesla stock to buy Twitter. And not only that, I don't really care about him selling Tesla stock and liquidating some of his position. What I care about is the mind share that goes along with it.
Yeah.
He diverted his focus, a percentage of his attention moved over to this other thing. And so it seemed as though for 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years after Twitter, Tesla was in somewhat of a limbo. Like they were still doing well in deliveries, they were still like chugging along, Cybertruck ramp, all that stuff. But you could feel the fact that Elon's full attention was not in it. And now I think with the court case around the compensation package and what we're seeing with full self driving hitting 1 billion miles, there's a couple of different things that changed, and also the fact that Tesla is hitting lows, and people are comparing it with not comparing it with Mag 7 anymore. They're saying all kinds of different things. The growth has died down, so on and so forth. That he's now diverting his attention back to Tesla. Like Elon to me strikes me as a person where he loves a good crisis, and he's the type of person where if something's on fire, like that's his element. If it's make or break, that's his element. And it felt as though he got bored of Tesla for a period of time because Tesla was like stable and chugging along and everything was good and there was no like real problems. And now that margins are falling, now that Cybertruck, ramp is going slower than expected. Giga Mexico, I think, has been pushed back, so on and so forth. FSD, he's been promising that since like 2018 and it hasn't come. I feel like when you put all those things together, along with the market sentiment out there, it seems as though Tesla is in a more dire position today than it was last year or 2 years ago. And so that's exactly what I want to see. And that's a signal, I think, for a lot of people who follow this company closely, like I do. And everybody who's here watching is like, oh, yeah, Tevis knows SoFi in and out. But it's like, I know Tesla probably better than SoFi, honestly. I've been in it for much longer. And that signal, I think, is very important because historically, if you had invested in those moments when Elon goes, into this hardcore mode, you would have done very, very well as a shareholder.
Yeah, I'm same as you. Like that, I think if Elon did not exist, let's say Sundar Pichai, God forbid, was the CEO of Tesla, and all exactly the same everything happened, I would be pretty bearish. I would wait for more information from earnings and also 8.8, but it's night and day different. Now with Elon himself, it seems like his attention is certainly much more directed towards Tesla, which is a good thing. Like if you don't believe in Elon, probably you should not invest in Tesla. I don't see why you would. There's a little bit more of a key man risk. They ended up announcing these 10% layoffs. I'm sure some of that, because there's a combination of several things. We saw a lot of job postings here in the United States and many parts of the world actually be taken down. So that was certainly, part of it. But these are not, slouches. Tesla employees tend to be very, very good. That actually, if you scroll down just a bit, it says, there's nothing I hate more, but it must be done. This will enable us to be lean, innovative, hungry for the next cycle. There's a mention there of reduplication as well and eliminating that, developing some more revolutionary technologies in auto, energy, and artificial intelligence. As we prepare the company for the next phase of growth, your resolve will make a huge difference in getting us there. It's never fun to be laid off. Some of the people that are laid off are amazing individuals, frankly. There were some big names that left. So that doesn't make me necessarily bearish towards Tesla. Just there's more in his hand. He's simplifying and changing things. We'll have to actually see what this is going to be like. As a shareholder, I would like more information as far as like why this is necessary, what's going on. If automation means is he just referring to mostly full self-driving and robotaxis, or is there other kind of automation that's happening and making some of this duplication apparent that they can change and pivot from? I hope we get a good answer on that the next earnings call. If I will say, if the next earnings call is done in a similar way as the previous earnings call, where there's very little information and clearly a lot of frustration coming out, I won't enjoy that as a shareholder. I won't sell, barring some thesis breaking element, which I don't foresee, like Elon resigning. I'd be like, all right, see you guys. If Elon's out, I'm out. No, ultimately I'll continue to hold and see how things play out. But I would like some more information there. What do you think as far as so he teased the auto thing. We talked about the automation. Is that all or mostly full self-driving and robotaxis, or is he hinting to something else?
Yeah, so let's go there because I think there's a natural dovetail in there, but let's just double tap on the layoffs for just a second. I think Sawyer put it really well. I want to read this tweet out. So here you can see that Tesla has done consistent layoffs every year, every other year. They do layoffs just to keep everybody there sharp, keep innovative ideas, bring new people. I think Elon even said, I don't have the tweet, but he said, every 5 years or so they have to refresh. He was meaning more around the executive level to just bring new ideas in. So 10% is not a small cut, especially Tesla being so large. We also saw executives leaving. Here, Sawyer says it seems Elon wants to go all in on AI, autonomy, and robotics to set Tesla up for its next phase of growth. He might have felt some restructuring and reorganization was needed. One thing I will say here is that just from following a lot of him on earnings calls and just what he tweets about and stuff like that, I think a lot of people forget that he has a good sense of the economy as well. So there's a couple of points I want to make. I think number one, like people forget that he started off in a payments company, right? PayPal, X.com. A lot of people know him as a engineer, rockets, cars, all this stuff, but he knows the economy very well as a result of that tenure. It can mean two things. Number one, we could see some macro weakness, absolutely. Or it could mean that, and this is what a lot of skeptics were speculating on, that it could just mean that demand is not as strong as expected for Tesla. Because you got to keep in mind, Roy, that like 10% of headcount, 14, 15,000 people, that's going to be, production line workers. It's not going to be just people in an office somewhere. It's going to be salespeople. It's going to be production line work. And so it's going to affect their delivery numbers. We saw them have really soft delivery numbers this time around. It was a decline year over year in delivery numbers. And so now that we are having layoffs, you're not going to have an increase in delivery numbers. You're going to have a further decrease in delivery numbers. And so a lot of people could be saying, okay, well, that is as a result of them having a demand softness. Or you could basically say that they're purely talking about the FSD, which is the other angle, which you can dive into.
Yeah, this is from Jesse on Twitter. I don't. It's not his chart originally, but he posted this today, and you see the big green arrow. Massive drop in Y inventory. I don't think that they're just like torching cars or anything like that. So that was certainly interesting. They did change, man. It seems like everything's freaking changing with Tesla. They changed the way that they had were selling their inventory models on the website. They're changing the website. They're in the process of changing their delivery and sales structure. And of course, we see this massive drop here. I'm guessing, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this too. Is this maybe a company that's come in and said, "Hey, we're going to buy 1,000 Teslas plus maybe that like 0 to 1%." Very low interest loans that are being offered. I see in Germany was, they had some offers, which certainly would drive sales. Or is there something I'm missing here?
Yeah, it could be a big deal, similar like a Hertz or something to that effect. I think the Germany news was pretty interesting, where they were offering 0-rate financing, and obviously they're funding that out of their own cash pool. Yeah, and like the timing of this, I think, is really interesting as well with regards to the layoffs. So if you zoom out, all of these things, hold on, let me pull this down. All these things are related, right? You have layoffs, you have 8.8 being announced, you have the billion miles, you have the compensation package, you have so many different pieces, the changes in structure around their sales, the executives, the discounting, the India news, which I think is going to be really important, and we can dive into that. My point is it's all related, and this is the wider theme of Elon going back into focusing on Tesla to say, okay, where have we gotten lazy? Where has there been bloat? What do we need to cut back on? What do we need to double down on? What is the next phase of our strategic growth path?
Yeah, he's a Julius Caesar. That's what he is, and not everybody's going to like him. Unless you have something else, let's pivot to India, because I think that is
well. So one thing I wanted to say, and I think we can knock this off before we pivot to India, is the shareholder vote. So Tesla announced a shareholder vote in the beginning of June, and the reason why I wanted to pivot there is because some of the criticism that I've been seeing on X, and I think it's fair if I'm sort of putting an empathetic lens on it, is the timing is interesting because it doesn't send a great message. If on one hand he's sending this sending this note, saying we need to have layoffs, and I want to thank everybody who's departing Tesla, and deeply grateful, blah blah blah. Um, we want to be lean for our next cycle, and then on the other hand, asking everybody to vote on his $47 billion. I think it's 47. It was 56, but now adjusted, it's less. Basically, like a $50 billion compensation package. Now, obviously, that was owed to him. He hit those milestones, and I totally think that he should get it. I'm just saying the optics don't look great because it came on like the same exact week. And so somebody who is not as deep into Tesla as we might be, looking at it from the outside in, they might say, Tesla, like, what dumpster fire is going on there? They're laying off their headcount and they're giving a huge bonus to their CEO. So just optically, I'm just, it's not a great look, but it's a result of a lot of these things happening in such quick succession to one another that he's just right sizing right now.
Yeah, this is the perfect. I know he had a red carpet event too. I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Of course, it's. I don't know if you can hear the Benny Hill soundtrack, but all right, enough of that.
Yeah.
It is it's entertaining to say the least, and I think there's a method to his madness. We talked about it last week. I believe that certainly some of this is reactionary because that's the way Elon operates. And if he feels attacked in a way or that people are doubting him, like he'll react. And so I think 8.8 was certainly that. The layoffs, I don't think were a spawn of that. I don't think laying off any of the key guys, Rohan Patel and Bag. I always get it wrong. Baglioni. Baglino. Thank you. I was like, man, I know it's not right. Those are key guys. Those are right hand people. Really good workers. Amazon probably is going to pick up one of them.
Yeah, can we hold on? There's so many things, Roy. Like insane. How many? Okay, hold on. What am I doing here? Present, share. Our favorite, Mr. Jeff Bezos, has just started following Drew Baglino, the senior vice president at Tesla, literally the day he left. Already trying to recruit him, sliding into his DMs. This is like a hot girl posting she's single. It was just, I get it. It's talent. Good talent is scarce out there, but it's crazy. One other person that left, I don't know if you might know this or not. Recently, their designer left. So Peter Blades, this was the lead designer on the Model Y and the new Roadster. Left the company after being there for 9.5 years. So again, Tesla has always been able to bounce back after these people leave. Coincidentally, I mean, they took down all of their job postings, or 80% of their job postings. I saw, a post on X about that. A lot of their, executive staff, those three names in particular, but we'll see how they bounce back. Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a crazy possibility as far as a conspiracy theory type thing. Jeff Bezos started following Drew Baglino. I always get his name wrong, but I think I got it right there. Drew, has been involved with Tesla for a long time. And of course, most recently known for the 4680, the battery. Amazon has a very large stake and has had since the beginning in Rivian.
Who also just laid off people today or yesterday.
Who did?
Rivian, a third round of playoffs.
Okay, I missed that. I'm kind of curious. I mean, it seems like Rivian, great vehicles themselves, but they're really struggling on manufacturing and scaling side. And there's ways to improve, but it seems like somebody that's cash rich needs to come in there. I've always thought Apple might be a good fit if they actually wanted an EV. I don't think they do. I think they've moved on. Amazon is buying a lot of their vans. I'm seeing them all over the place here at Houston. It would be interesting if they let's bring in Drew, let's buy Rivian, and let's install Drew there very high up. If not, I mean, they may just need a new CEO at this point. I don't know that he'd be an ideal perfect CEO, but he's a credible candidate. It'd be interesting. They'd be able to keep Rivian alive indefinitely if they wanted to. I don't
Yeah.
know that they want to do that, but if they want in the EV game, and it seems like Bezos does have. Well, Bezos isn't in charge. I know that he's still involved though. But Jack, let's see if he says, okay, yeah, let's get in this EV game. Let's compete. Rivian is the way that they would do that, and I could absolutely see them picking up a number of these key people that have left Tesla and being able to try to right the ship in Rivian. It's going to take a while. Tough place for EVs. What do you think of that? Crazy? Or really, really crazy?
I honestly don't think it's that crazy at all. I mean, look, you have a small pool of top talent that just recycles these, 4 or 5 firms. I think, you know how like book publishers or Hollywood studios, they have like a first right of refusal basically built into the contract where if something like if this book does get made into a movie, we have the first right of refusal. Like we get to choose if we want to make it or if we don't, and then you can go to other places. The way I see it, and this might be flawed, but the way I see it is Tesla has created somewhat of an ecosystem similar to that amongst Elon's companies. You have massive improvements, and I was seeing a post about this, massive improvements on full self-driving 12.4. And the speculation is that some of the AI developers from X AI, the guys who built Grok, had a hand to contribute there. When Elon started X, about 50 people from SpaceX and Tesla, top engineers, came in and took over. You have top engineers moving back and forth from SpaceX to Tesla. You're seeing that now with the new Roadster, where he's basically saying that the new Roadster is going to have like rocket engines on it. It's a collaboration with SpaceX. And so if you imagine that, if you are a developer or a product manager or whatever, if you're an employee in the ecosystem of Elon's companies, that ecosystem has a first right of refusal. Because if I want to go work with other smart people, instead of going to Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, I can go to SpaceX. Instead of going to, somewhere else, I can go to Neuralink, or I can go wherever inside. I can go to X, or I can go to X AI and work on Grok. Like there's so many things that you can do because just Elon's companies, again, as a result of this guy being so obsessive, he has his hand in multiple cookie jars. And so,
Yeah, but you
I'm not surprised
don't work
if
on
it, but go ahead.
you don't work on Grok. Grok works on you. That's
Yeah, sure. But that's just the point that I wanted to make is yes, he can absolutely go to Rivian, but if they wanted to stay within that ecosystem, they definitely can because you have this open policy of people moving in and out.
yeah. It didn't seem like I know that Amit, for instance, and some others had seen and read between the lines as far as what Elon posted in the goodbyes from these street folks.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like there was hostility. I've read it before where there is hostility, and usually in those cases they say absolutely nothing. But sometimes they'll go scorched earth. This didn't seem like that. It seemed like that they were legitimately sad, moving on. These guys will land on their feet. I have no doubt. Some within the 10,000 people or not 10,000, 10%, even larger number that were laid off won't. It'll be a tough time, but I hope for anybody laid off, if you're watching this, sorry for what you're going through. I went through that too back in late 2008, early 2009. It's not fun. So I hope you land on your feet. But as far as a company, I'm trusting Elon here. That's ultimately what Tesla is about. And so, but I hope to hear a lot more details when quarter one earnings come out. We need to do that.
This was Baglino's post, right? Warm spot for the people of Tesla products. I mean, he joined as a junior firmware and electrical engineer back in 2006. He's been with the company 18 years. It's crazy. I mean, Elon commented on this. He said, thank you for always pushing us. Like, it's all good vibes here.
Oh
And then
yeah.
he also said, looking forward, I have no concrete plans beyond spending more time with family and young kids. So we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up at Rivian, or if he opens his own company, or Redwood Materials and anything like that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. Or even if he comes back, right? Like Karpathy left and came back and left and came back. And so you have these people who need a break. I remember in Isaacson's biography, there was one of these employees who literally was getting burned out at Tesla, working weekends, working nights, just crazy hours, crazy difficult, working environment. And at some point, he quit, he threw in the towel, and he was right back at Tesla after 6 months. And he said, if I had a choice between being bored or being burned out, I would choose being burned out. And I'm not saying, like, I'm not advocating for that. I have been burned out. It sucks. But what I am saying is that a lot of these people, they're wired in such a way that they crave that kind of challenge. And these are some of the most innovative companies in the world with regards to the problems that they're working on solving. And so they're always going to be a hub for smart, hardworking people as a result of the value proposition of the product itself.
Let's stay on Tesla, but there's a few things I don't want to miss.
We can go to
One is,
India.
yeah, let's do India.
Yeah.
We'll talk Model 2, and then
Model
I
2.
want to talk expectations for FSD robotaxi.
Yes. Great. So let me throw this up. Let's see. All right. So a couple days ago, according to an Indian senior minister, Elon Musk plans to set up an entire Tesla ecosystem in India. He's going to go to India, I think, in a couple of weeks to meet the PM over there, Narendra Modi. And the rumor is, from what we've been seeing from people in the Indian government, that there's going to be probably somewhere between a $2 to $3 billion investment in India, probably a gigafactory. We don't have the specifics as of yet. He hasn't had his trip yet, but these are the types of posts that we are seeing from X here. So Elon Musk set to announce an investment in India of 2 to 3 billion, mainly for building a new factory, when he visits New Delhi next week to meet the Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Yeah, I think this is a smart idea. There's a lot of people in India. I know that some other companies have had a harder time, namely Apple, in moving to India, although their products are very well loved. Tesla has a fantastic reputation, from what I understand, in India. I actually need to talk to a couple of my Indian friends and ask what they think of it. But they're going to sell vehicles there no matter what. Plus, it's a cheaper and more friendly place to manufacture from. They're actually, the biggest drawback for India for a little while was energy prices, and like it or hate it, because of what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, India has a lot better access to cheap energy right now. So that's certainly helping them as well. And Tesla has an outsized risk even now with China, and it's not just the Shanghai Gigafactory.
Yep. The government regulation.
Yeah, I don't love that as a shareholder, and so
yeah,
the more that we can diversify where materials are coming from and where things are produced, India, great, Mexico, great. That helps, helps spread that risk. So if something happens with China, it's not just an instant loss of like 30% of the business. It'll still hurt. It won't be good, and hopefully nothing like that will ever happen. But no, I love it. Labor, of course, is a bit cheaper over there too.
super
And
cheap.
I mean, I know some Indians quite well, and man, they are incredibly hardworking people. Just very, very motivated. Yeah, I'm biased, but
Yeah, I love it for a variety of different reasons. I remember in the SoFi Weekly After Hours on Saturday, we were talking a little bit about this. If anybody wants to get access to that, consider becoming a member to the channel, where we post members only videos. But on that episode, we were talking about the full self-driving training, which we can pivot onto after this. But we were saying how it's likely more well trained in North America because you have the majority of the vehicles historically have been in North America versus driving in India, for example, is like FSD on hard mode, right? People don't abide by the rules of the road. The system is completely different. It's just more chaotic. There's a massive amount of population. It's just pandemonia everywhere. If you get more Teslas in India, you can obviously train FSD in that jurisdiction. That'll ramp up. You have cheap labor in India. I would guarantee you that this gigafactory in India is probably going to have some record construction speed to rival China. I think China was 10 months or 11 months to construct. Mexico is definitely not going to be anywhere near that, especially with the slowdowns. India definitely can. A combination of a government being super accommodative, super quick on the permits passing through, no red tape, and just the giant an access to a giant amount of cheap labor, right? That can build this thing. So from a production perspective, it makes sense. They can hit a bigger, geography that's not just centralized in China, and they reduce that dependence on, the Chinese government to some degree, because if 50% of Tesla's deliveries are going to be out of China, then you have the US government starting to get involved with a similar way that they're involved for Apple and all of these other Mag 6 companies with their relationship with China. And so India has a multi-purpose benefit for Tesla, not only from a production perspective, but also it opens a door for quick deliveries in that entire market. That trains FSD too. Biggest
Yeah.
populations in the world, right? Like what, number 2? So
June had a comment there. Too many cows on the road. I mean, when I was there, not quite 3 weeks. This is like 7 years ago now. It's need to go back. Great place. It's a real thing. You got cows in the road. All sorts of it. Just any crazy thing that you can possibly imagine. Whether you're driving through villages, smaller towns, or like Mumbai, it just if FSD can pull off India, it can pull off anything, anywhere,
any
anytime. And the weather is just crazy there too, like monsoon season, man. So yeah, I think it'll provide an opportunity there. Let me ask you this: as far as so we don't know what they're going to build there. I guess 2 questions. Model 2, is that happening still? Is it postponed? Is that just going to all be robotaxi Model 2, no actual human thing? And if Model 2 is made anytime soon, would India be a good hub for that?
Okay. So a couple things. Let me see if I think Sawyer posted this. So Model 2 is a somewhat tricky subject. I think really Elon has the opportunity here in the Q1 earnings that are coming up very shortly next Tuesday. He has the opportunity to tank the stock or to sort of tell the market exactly what they want to hear. I want to just bring this up. Here's some of the retail investor Q&A. As you can see, FSD is a big topic: Cybertruck, robotaxi, Optimus, 25K model, India. So you're going to see a lot of these topics here. Some of the highest voted, following Tesla's robotaxi unveil on 8/8, what is a realistic timeline for launching a revenue generating network? What's the process on a cheaper next gen vehicle? What's the timeline for Tesla robots? So on and so forth. What's the priorities going into this next quarter? Like, people are really interested in having, when can we get an official announcement of the 25K vehicle? People are really interested in this because it removes a layer of uncertainty in the market with regards to Tesla. I think with regards to the $25,000 vehicle, what we've learned from Walter Isaacson's biography is that Elon has always been against it. Against it in the sense that, I forget where I saw this. I think Elon liked the post or commented on a post. Basically, they were saying that this $25,000 model is going to have lower margins because the actual the sales value, MSRP, is going to be lower, right? It's $25,000. And so the margins are going to be lower. And yes, they can mass produce this thing, but they're going to be taking home a smaller portion of money. And the real money grab is robotaxi. It's that entire paradigm shift. But right now, a lot of the premium that Tesla gets, they get for the ramp that they're going to see in terms of deliveries. Robotaxi is nowhere on the radar of a lot of these people, except for Kathy Wood, perhaps. And so everybody, from a market perspective, is expecting a $25,000 car that they can produce 20 million units of, and then that's going to be Tesla in 10 to 15 years. That's the roadmap. 20 million, $25,000 cars. Now, Elon is against this. Well, he's historically been against it because he's been overly optimistic on the roadmap for the robotaxi. And so it's a matter of, are we going to produce, we know it's the same platform. Are we going to produce them with a steering wheel and with a pedal, which is the $25,000 car, a two-seater? Or are we just going to produce them with no steering wheel and no pedal, which is, we get that information from the Walter Isaacson biography, and that's going to be the robotaxi. I've said before that I think the play is that the $25,000 car is the stopgap until we receive regulatory approval for the robotaxi, where basically they have a green light from officials to remove the steering wheel, to remove the pedals, and then have this thing fully drive you around. Of course, one thing is that the approval is going to be staggered across the world. It's going to be first in the US. Probably they're going to pilot it in a couple of states, and then it might be years.
Yeah,
until
I think
Asia.
Austin and San Francisco.
Yes.
On the timetable of that, I'm thinking, and tell me like, hey, this is way too optimistic or like bearish. I think by the end of this next year, we could see actual robotaxis operating like in Austin or San Francisco, a couple of cities in the United States. Probably not much more than that. Too early? Too much?
Yeah. So last thing I want to say on robotaxi is, again, from the Walter Isaacson biography, which is really insightful because he only published it, last summer. We learned that Mexico was initially the plant that was going to exclusively produce these models because it was going to be vertically integrated, to the sense that even they could implement their learnings from Austin, from Shanghai, from Fremont, from Berlin, all into the production line of Mexico and make it the most efficient factory out there. Because Mexico was taking so long, what we learned was, and number one, taking so long. Number two, the top engineering talent didn't want to move down to Mexico. Elon made a sort of audible decision, a shotgun decision, to create the Model 2, or whatever we want to call it, in Austin. So can India be the factory for the Model 2? Yes, from a technical perspective, like it's going to be vertically integrated with those best practices in place. If they make a Model 2, sure. But I think if robotaxi is what they're going to do, then probably not. Because again, we have no FSD, very, very little FSD awareness in India, very, very high FSD awareness in North America. So you're going to pick and choose your battles here, not to mention regulatory perspectives.
All right. So when let's do some timelines. Well, I guess first, just to make sure I understood, where you take Model 2 is you think at least he should be coming out with a two-seater that people can actually buy Model 2 at some point, and then be able to pivot that into the actual robotaxi, no steering wheel, anything. Or do you think that there's not even going to be a passenger one that actually has the two-seaters and steering wheel that people can drive around?
Here's where I say Elon can really tank the stock. Because if he comes out and he says, oh, we're actually not going to make a Model 2, we're only going to make robotaxi, stock's tanked. The reason why is because the entire market is expecting 20 million Model 2s that all have steering wheels, and they're all so efficient. They're two-seaters, right? I think it would be the smart move. And I mean, I don't want to be like a, backseat strategist for Tesla, but I think the smart move would be to just make the Model 2 and have that be the first gen robotaxi, because then you avoid the regulatory problem. People can still use their car and still collect miles in the meanwhile. And you also, The problem, Roy, becomes, let's say I have a non-steering wheel version and a steering wheel version, and I commit to making both of them. Then the next natural question becomes, what is the split of how many of these ones or those ones am I going to make? If we have approval to have cars drive themselves without a steering wheel, without pedals, why would Tesla make ones with steering wheel and pedal? It just adds more complexity. It adds more cost to them. If I can buy a car for $25,000 and I can, pimp it out basically and let it drive 24 hours a day and charge for 30 minutes a day or whatever, and it has no steering wheel or pedals and I own it and it makes me revenue, why do I care? Right.
Yeah.
And
I think
so
we're a long ways away from that, though.
we are. And so that's the whole point. It's like, do we go with the steering wheel and pedal? And then I can then turn that into my own robotaxi as like a Gen 1 until the non-steering wheel version comes out? Or does Elon make the bet to say we're jumping straight into the non-steering wheel version because by the time this reaches mass production, we're going to have the regulatory license in hand? That's a risky play.
Yeah, I think that he's going to come out and say, maybe not say it, but there won't be a passenger Model 2. I think that there should be. There's these specific targets and goals that Tesla has. I believe it's through 2030, as far as number of vehicles in the world. I don't see the way that they can actually get there without a lower entry model, unless something radically shifts and changes. The
Mhm.
other factor too is, of course, the more cars that are on the road, the more possibility there is to be able to sign up people for services like full self driving, the connectivity package, insurance. There's, of course, the whole parts business. And then it helps, as far as supercharger network, and it helps people understand like, hey, EVs are actually credible. The other thing is there are so few $25,000 vehicles and below here in the United States that are brand new vehicles. It's like a dozen. That just inflation has decimated that, and the concept of an entry level, just a cheap car, probably a two seater, it's lost in the market. It almost doesn't exist. There's a few imports that do have that, so I think it would absolutely kill here. Plus, if it was actually made in bulk in Austin, we can't it's you can't build your business around this, but if that $7,500 tax credit existed and they managed to sell this thing for 25,000 a pop, you take 7,500 off of that and more in some states, like you're talking about like a $14,000 vehicle like in California. It's like, it's who would not buy that? I
Dude, it's
the,
crazy. Motorcycles are more expensive.
yeah, they could
No brainer.
ramp their cells dramatically, like ridiculously, and just dominate the freaking market. And so, but it's easier said than done. But I think that that is a quicker boost for Tesla than robotaxis and full self driving. Of course, this is Christian all they're doing with full self driving, and I think they'll accelerate the development. We already talked about that a bit, but I don't know. I'd prefer to actually see a real Model 2 coming out. I think the company could probably focus on both at the same time, but I don't know. Like if it not, I want to hear clearly, what's happening with that. We have the Reuters article, I think, that came out about this time last week. Maybe it's
Been
Thursday,
like
but
it's been like 2 weeks on that. But
yeah.
so
Um,
I'm a big fan of the actual Model 2 and providing a cheap. So you need stopgaps, man. You need like intermediary points. You
yeah,
can't just change the paradigm today for tomorrow, right? Um, the Model 2 is just that. It allows people to put this thing in full self-driving mode if they want, to drive it if they want, and it doesn't need any hurdles from a regulatory perspective. So I think that that is the play that should be done, to have
safer.
the thing with us. It's definitely safer, and it's what the market is expecting from a production perspective to mass produce this cheap vehicle, which removes any objection you could possibly have for not buying an EV. And if they want to do robotaxi, I think they do a closed pilot program where they allocate 100,000 or 200,000 cars and they don't sell them. I can't use it. You can't use it. It's only Tesla having their own, fleet for their Uber service, essentially. And that's how they pilot this thing out. And then the next step is they sell it to Roy without a steering wheel and Tevis without a steering wheel, and then we can have a revenue split in the robotaxi network. But I think that the first step, again, going from a safe perspective, the first step has to be Tesla carving out a portion of the fleet that just they own, and it just has recurring revenue in the form of the taxis, right?
So robotaxis, in as far as like most realistic, optimistic, a couple of localities end of year next year, like Waymo does, or what are you thinking?
It's not up to Tesla, man. I think it's up to like, the regulators to once they approve it. I think Tesla can get moving fairly quickly, but at what point are they confident enough that this thing is street ready, right? And you can make so much progress in terms of miles driven without accident. That's one of the major KPIs that they track. And then you can watch a YouTube video of this thing just like randomly turning in the middle of the street, and people are going to get spooked from it. So, um, this is why it's risky for Tesla, because it's out of their hands in terms of the approvals. It's not like there's no rules. It's a wild west, and whoever buys it, and good luck to make it a free market decision. It's like, no, this is a regulated thing. It's public health and safety. So whenever they approve it, they control the timeline.
Yeah. And I think it's easier to approve, in localities rather than, a whole state. It'll limit it somewhat, but I mean, that's the way most taxis are used anyways, just inner city driving rather than I'm going to
Yeah,
go from Austin to San Antonio.
the business is beautifully synergistic, right? Because then you have Tesla Insurance as well in the mix, and they're like expanding that as well in terms of the jurisdictions that they're working in. And already, if you get Tesla Insurance today, they like if you have a Tesla and that's what you're driving, and then you have Tesla Insurance, they'll go um, based on the analytics in your car in terms of how you're driving it to determine your insurance rate. Because like right now, if I were to go with a traditional legacy insurance provider, it's like if your car is red, if you're a certain age, you have a higher premium, which is absolutely stupid, right? They have these like legacy measures to determine your premium, whereas Tesla is all data driven in that aspect. And so if you double down on the full self driving, and you can see, you can have daily downloads or uploads of data, and that's going to be reflected in the insurance. You basically keep people in this entire ecosystem of all Tesla products that collaborate with each other, right? You have the FSD subscription, you have the insurance, you have the robotaxi. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that are synergistic. It's just a matter of like what puzzle pieces come before the other ones.
Yeah, but that's why one of the reasons why I'm interested as a shareholder. Somebody asked about the thesis, and that's short term. It's that flywheel effect. They are an EV leader; they will be throughout the world. But then they have a lot of basically, I think at this point, with where the stock's priced, free call options. So you have the robo taxis, which I don't fully believe in, full self driving, which I'm a lot more optimistic on than I was, a few months ago. And of course, ultimately the robots, Dojo, maybe like we'll see. And there's a whole lot of little understated areas and parts of Tesla's business, which like insurance could be an incredible revenue driver in a few years. We'll just have to see. But
Yeah, I mean, he said in the Isaacson biography, he said in previous interviews, like there's a lot of stuff that you won't even think about around the full self driving, the robotaxi, that are difficult problems to solve. To basically say, I want an Uber that costs me $3 instead of $12, and then instead of some random driver, it doesn't have a driver at all, and it has a big ass screen, and I can have an entertainment system. I can do the work. I can do whatever. And then, what he said in the biography when Walter Isaacson was asking him, he said, what's one of the problems that people don't think about? He's like, how are people going to open the door? How are people going to close the door? Or if I do a Uber Eats, how are they going to get the food in the car or out of the car? Like, how's it going to go through a drive-through? Like, there's so many, like, are you going to have like a robotic arm on this thing that like opens and closes? And so, like, you don't think about these things. You just think about, is it going to crash? Is it not going to crash? Is it going to follow the rules of the road? But anyways, these are things that go into account.
The absolute worst would be to have an Optimus spot and they're actually driving it and touching the pedal and getting the food and every. I mean, like that could work, but that's so far out. It's just
Oh my gosh, the
uh,
Optin spot. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, it is interesting as far as like with Tesla, and I know we're kind of running a little bit over, but just Google is another company that just has, as far as CEO, like night and day difference. And so, this week, of course, there was the news that came out that the Project Nimbus is being protested at New York location and location in California by a number of their employees. They're doing sit-ins. They're just not working, just and basically occupying offices. And this was something similar to what Google went through back in 2018. In 2018, there's Project Maven with the Pentagon, and a lot of Google employees. There's about 3,000 of them that signed a petition that said, "Hey, we should not be involved at all in any war effort ever." And I understand where people are coming from, but ultimately, same CEO as they have right now, Sundar Pichai, capitulated and they got rid of that project. They steered clear for a while of a lot of government contracts, specifically Pentagon, and they've kind of gotten back into that a bit. Now you have Israel, same thing. Even though this Project Nimbus, in the terms of subscription that Israel, whoever signed the contract with Google did, they agreed to not use it for highly sensitive military endeavors, that sort of thing. And it's not been used in that way. If it had been, Google would be well within their rights to actually terminate and impose a very hefty fee on Israel. But it's not being used for that. It's being used for hospitals, infrastructure, that sort of thing. Yet, nevertheless, these employees, they sat there without working, without doing anything. In protest, they were asked to leave, and finally, they were trespassed from the building. I'm kind of, if this was Elon Musk, how do you think this would be handled?
Dude, it's funny because I remember when the Twitter acquisition went through and people were like, "Oh, well, what's his name? Parag, the CEO of Twitter, has a golden parachute, and Elon has to pay him, $80 million dollars or whatever if he fires him within the first year. And I don't know what's going to happen. And, they're going to keep him on." Dude literally walks in and within 10 minutes of being in the building, storms into one of the meeting rooms and fires the entire executive team, regardless of any financial repercussions whatsoever. Day
Yeah.
one, 10 minutes in, as soon as he got the keys, basically. So I think there's a zero tolerance policy for that kind of shit for politics at the workplace.
Oh, yeah.
It's and these things are weeded out in the interview process, right? Like you have, thousands, if not tens of thousands of candidates for a small amount of jobs. I guarantee you everybody who's applying, or at least half, let's just say, of the people who are applying know the ethos of that company. They know they're going to be working incredibly hard, probably harder than they've ever worked before in any other company. And they know that they're working for a very, autocratic, no bullshit kind of guy, short fuse. He's kind of an asshole to work with. Like I've said it, before. Like I don't think I would ever work for him, but
Yeah.
I would definitely invest in anything he touched.
Yeah, he's a
Simply
dictator.
because, yeah,
Not even a benevolent one.
yeah,
Versus Sundar Pichai, he is like a peacetime CEO. Like if things are great in the macro and everything's stable and even technology is stable, you don't have to be ruthless. You can be kind and nice and ask people to leave and cater to different demands and have a soft workplace environment where people for their like 40 or 50-hour day that they actually, or not day, week, they
yeah,
accomplish like 10 hours of freaking work. That's the reputation Google has. That's what people know when they get there. And hey, I would prefer to work at Google than Tesla, just because for
oh
that
yeah,
reason, like Tesla, I have a family. Like I know if I worked at Tesla, it's like 60 to 70-hour weeks. I would not get to see my wife and kids. So it's like that's not
dude,
everybody, but it's a reality. The expectations are very high. The pay is good, and it's a competitive, great place to be. But
yeah,
yeah, like no baloney. Like if I was messing around, just not wanting to work, it's like all right, next man, you're done.
yeah. And the thing is, like, so I work in the tech sector, and I'm very sort of, my entire network is in the tech sector. The running joke for all the FANG companies was, that those are the companies where you went to get paid 500K a year. to work 10 hours a week. And you could say, oh, well, this is triggering my mental health. Oh, well, I'm not feeling, I need a, whatever day. And it was just like so lax that whatever excuse you had came first. And I mean, Elon even commented there was a Google thing and all these people with masks and their signs protesting or whatever. And somebody said, how many, collectively, how many lines of code do you think these people shipped this week? And Elon just commented with an emoji on that. And I just think it's so true. Like, this is the reason why you had Meta having layoffs, you had Google having layoffs, you had all of these companies. There's so much bloat and they're not doing anything, man. Like, do you understand that Elon cut 80% of Twitter and they shipped more things than they've ever shipped in any previous year? How do you
And
explain that? Like all of the expenses on these luxurious bars, the catering for the food, just so much incredible amount of bloat. And so, yeah, of course I would go work for Google as opposed to Tesla because life is peaches and cream, man.
and the cuts that are there, Google still needs cuts, I'm sure, but they're very slow and gradual and gentle. Tesla is like, hey, 10% of the workforce. Google, has all these failed projects that have come out time and time again. Elon doesn't have patience for that. If something is failing and not working, he's not afraid to pivot the entire company. Apple's another one where they invested so much time and attention and money into the Apple car, which it's never going to happen. So now they're behind on AI. So but you look at the actual stock price, like Google is doing, very well this year, which surprises me, frankly. But the market could get things wrong. And of course, Google is printing cash. To be fair,
Right.
it's not a terrible company by any means. It's just I think the CEO just doesn't have what it takes to actually help that company right the ship and to help them chart into the future. Versus Elon Musk, Tesla is the worst performing, even worse than Boeing company in the S&P 500, and it's not close. Like it's getting worse. That spread between them and Boeing, and yet I think that what he's doing, I don't understand everything that's happening. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that in the next quarter.
Mhm.
But the thing that he's doing is pivoting this company forward in the future, and he's not afraid to make painful decisions right now in order to do that. We've seen that time and time again, and so I wanted to throw that Google bit up there just because I thought it was pertinent. And if you don't take care of things like this, that Project Maven, now Project Nimbus, like these sort of protests and nonsense will continue. And people are entitled to their own opinions. Like if they believe that, that's great.
Yeah.
But you can't just say, I'm not going to work and we should completely dump Israel or the Pentagon, because at some point you destroy the business when you cater to that, because other
Absolutely.
governments and other companies will be like, hey, Google has a great cloud offer, great business, great technology, but are they going to actually be there when we need them?
Yeah. Look, two things I'll say on that. Number one, if you don't have a zero tolerance policy of separating keeping work at work and everything else outside of work, then it's incredibly difficult to draw the line anywhere. Because today it's, oh, I'm upset about, some conflict around the world and Israel. And, yesterday it was, oh, I'm upset about Ukraine. And tomorrow it's going to be, oh, I'm upset about something else. And like, there's going to be things that make you upset on a daily basis. If the Liberal government in Canada raised taxes and I just didn't show up to work the next day in protest of that, guess what happened? I get some pretty tough questions about why I didn't show up. I can't, play the victim card for every single thing that happens. You're an adult. Go do your job. That's what you're paid to do, especially at Google, where your salaries are like $250,000 plus. So that's one thing. If you don't have a zero tolerance policy, it's incredibly difficult to draw the line. The second thing, with regards to how they approach headcount, is fundamentally different because one of Elon's core principles is like, I want to cut, like, I'll have known I've gone too far if I cut, too much and like the site comes down, things stop working. I've only cut too much when I have to hire back 10 or 20% of the people afterwards. And so it's just like, how deep do I have to go to hit the bone? Right? If I cut 80%, is everything still running? Are the servers still up? Is the website still up? Like, what's going on? And if yes, you probably haven't cut enough. If things are breaking, then you probably need to add some back. So just that scientific method of like, hey, here's my hypothesis, here's what happened. Did I cut too much? Did I cut, like, let's diagnose and go back. I think that is fundamentally different than how Google or any other, you know, top 10 market cap company handles their layoffs.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess to kind of wrap things up, unless there's other elements with Tesla, like we're both more bullish simply because Tesla has the focus of Elon for the first time in what seems like quite a while, ever since the Twitter acquisition. So, and that's one of the reasons why we're seeing and why we're talking so much about Tesla. It's 5% of my portfolio. It's not like yours. Continuing to grow it, but there's so much news because it has Elon's focus. And as long as it continues to hold Elon's focus, and I think that it will for a while, that's usually spells very good things for shareholders, but not necessarily instantly and overnight. We might have more pain that's coming, but I'll keep adding slowly and building out that Tesla position so I can be a bag holder like you. Just kidding. You're way up, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I am up, but I'm still averaging up, and I've been
Yeah.
averaging up for the past couple of years. I think, I can't find the post right now, but one of these posts was saying that Tesla's at the same price that it was in, whatever
years.
it was,
Yep.
3 years, let's say. Just look at the improvements that they've done over those 3 years
Yeah.
and say, okay, well, this is the same price that I'm paying for this company today. It can go down to 150. Maybe it can go down even further than that. But if you zoom out, and I think that's a similar theme with SoFi as well. Like, zoom out, and I think that you're going to be very well rewarded. And yes, shares are better than having a nice cost basis. Although, Roy, I do love having a nice cost basis. I've been adding to some other accounts. It's just so I have an account with I have one account with it's like a $5.50, something like that, SoFi cost basis. And I just don't add shares in that account. I just add it to the other ones.
No, I'm about to get probably switching jobs here by late May. And if that happens, then I have a large allotment that was in general broad funds that I can actually put in individual stocks. So likewise, I'll be buying pretty much everything that's in my portfolio, just not at perhaps the fantastic averages I like. So it is kind of nice to have like something where it's like, hey, look at this amazing average. But it's like, bottom line is, I want more Tesla. I want more SoFi. I have enough money coming in that I'll actually, if Palantir keeps where it's at, I'm going to be buying that too. PayPal, Robinhood too. So, and adding some Nubank for the first time. So we'll see. Crypto miners as well.
Yeah, I haven't added too much this month because of taxes, but next month is going to be going at it hard. I added a little bit of Celsius today. That was great.
Nice.
So
not a sponsor yet.
Not a sponsor yet. Tesla earnings next Tuesday.
Yep.
I don't think I can stream the earnings. I have other obligations, but SoFi earnings, Monday the 29th, pre-market. We're going to be talking about that maybe next week on Btlg. Definitely next week on SoFi Weekly. I still have to work on a predictions video, but got to push that back to next week maybe. It's going to be exciting to see.
Yeah.
Any last words?
Somebody mentioned nice little Celsius dip. Yeah, the market is dipping. Do your DD now if you haven't already, and know what you hold. That way, when companies go through storms like this, and it's sometimes it's just a stock price, you're not shaken. You know what's happening. Stock price can do anything, but if you know the companies, you know the fundamentals. Eventually, it's not the efficient market hypothesis or anything, but eventually those do play out. So very excited, very, very entertaining week. And of course, next week, because Tesla earnings, we'll be talking more Tesla too. I'm sure some other things, but really appreciate you guys tuning in. It's enjoyable to this chat, to see the interactions there as well. Appreciate y'all.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.